Keisha was a woman who lit up every room she walked into. With her confident smile and a style that mixed luxury with a dash of rebellion, she'd always been the center of attention. Her days were filled with glamorous events, high-end parties, and moments that reminded her of her self-worth. Every morning, she'd look at herself in the mirror and see not just beauty, but strength and independence. Keisha loved nothing more than to flaunt her curves and wear the finest lingerie, each piece chosen with care from her favorite boutique, laced by T. Her life, filled with sparkle and indulgence, was a vivid tapestry of high fashion and genuine warmth. But behind her carefree laughter and dazzling looks lay a soul that had weathered storms of hurt and betrayal. Although she carried herself with an effortless grace, there were whispers of a past that had scarred her. She'd always brushed them off with a casual shrug and a laugh, claiming she'd learned to dance with the pain. Yet, on those quiet nights when the city slept and the world outside slowed down, Keisha would wonder if the light on her path was truly steady. The reflection in her mirror wasn't just a glamorous woman, it was a fighter who had risen above every setback. Even as she sipped her wine and admired her reflection in the soft glow of her bedroom light, she knew that every glimmer in her eyes told a story of survival and hope. Life had handed her both jewels and jagged stones, and she'd learned to treasure them both. Every wrinkle and every smile line was proof of battles won and lessons learned. Her luxurious lifestyle wasn't just about appearances, it was a testament to the strength that came from embracing life's highs and lows with equal fervor. And as she prepared for another night out, she couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, something big was about to change, something that might turn her world upside down. Even so, Keisha smiled, knowing that her story was far from over and that the best chapters were yet to come. Keisha's evenings were sacred rituals of self-love and quiet indulgence. After a long day of meeting people and turning heads at events, she'd come home to the comfort of her spacious apartment, a haven filled with elegant decor and soft, ambient lighting. Tonight, as she poured herself a glass of wine, she felt an unusual mix of empowerment and vulnerability. Standing before her full-length mirror, she admired the way the lace by T lingerie hugged her curves perfectly, a reminder that she was more than just a pretty face in expensive clothes. "I've earned every bit of this," she murmured to herself, her tone casual yet determined. Each sip of wine seemed to unlock memories of past victories, while also hinting at the silent struggles she'd never let show. In the privacy of her well-lit dressing room, Keisha's reflection became a confidant, a partner in her nightly routine of affirmation and self-appreciation. The lace whispered secrets of resilience, of nights spent alone yet never lonely, and of dreams that soared despite every setback. As she traced a finger along the fabric, she recalled the promises she'd made to herself, to always choose strength over sorrow and to never let anyone define her worth. There was something raw and real in the way she talked to herself, a gentle conversation that felt as honest as the beating of her heart. "Tonight, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving," she told herself, her voice soft but certain. Outside, the city hummed with life, unaware of the quiet transformation happening in her room. The gentle clink of ice in her wine glass mixed with the faint sound of a distant car passing by, creating a lullaby of sorts that wrapped around her like a warm blanket. In this simple yet profound moment of solitude, Keisha was both muse and warrior, ready to face whatever came next. Her evening of indulgence was more than a nightly ritual, it was a declaration of self-love and a silent promise that no matter what the future held, she'd always shine from within. Keisha's world spun around her like a top that had lost its balance. One ordinary afternoon, a phone call shattered the calm she'd built up over the years. Marcus, the man she'd once trusted with all her heart, said it in a tone that left no room for negotiation. Their marriage was over. His voice, cold and unyielding, echoed through her mind as she sat alone in her favorite armchair, the weight of his words pressing on her chest. "It's done," he had said, as if casually announcing the end of a business deal. The words stung like a slap in the face. Keisha couldn't believe what she was hearing. In one moment, the man who had promised to be her rock had crumbled the vows they'd once shared. Her heart pounded fiercely, each beat echoing the betrayal that now defined their relationship. The memories of laughter, shared dreams, and whispered promises in the dark suddenly felt like distant echoes in a vast, empty hall. "How could he do this?" she whispered to the empty room, her voice trembling with disbelief. The simple fact that Marcus had reduced their years together to a single, callous statement was overwhelming. For the first time in her life, Keisha felt completely exposed and vulnerable, as if someone had stripped away the layers of strength she'd so carefully built. Her mind raced through every moment they'd shared, trying to pinpoint the moment when things had gone so terribly wrong. With each passing second, the pain grew sharper, mingling with anger and sadness in a confusing, swirling mix of emotions. Marcus's words weren't just an end, they were a declaration of betrayal, a final nail in the coffin of a life that had once promised love and happiness. And now, with her world shattered around her, Keisha was left to pick up the pieces, wondering how she could ever trust again. The sound of her own heartbeat filled the silence, a reminder that even in the face of such deep hurt, she would have to find a way to stand up, to reclaim the strength that was still very much a part of who she was. Just as Keisha was beginning to navigate the turbulent aftermath of Marcus's callous words, an unexpected presence burst into her sanctuary. Tasha arrived like a storm, with an air of unyielding authority and a striking look that commanded attention. Dressed in a legendary red lace robe from the Revenge collection, Tasha's entrance was as bold as it was intimidating. She didn't tiptoe around this situation. Tasha strode into the room, her eyes fixed on Keisha with a mixture of challenge and intrigue. "We need to talk," she said in a tone that was cool and commanding, leaving no doubt that she was here on her own terms. Keisha's heart skipped a beat. The woman who had intruded into her already shattered life seemed to carry an energy that was both dangerous and magnetic. In that moment, the air thickened with tension as the two women faced each other, their silent stares speaking louder than words. Tasha's confidence clashed with Keisha's lingering hurt, creating a charged atmosphere where every second felt like a spark waiting to ignite a fire. "Who are you?" Keisha managed to ask, her voice a mix of defiance and uncertainty. "Someone who's got answers," Tasha replied, her words laced with a hint of mystery and an undeniable promise of revelations yet to come. It wasn't just her attire that made Tasha unforgettable, it was her whole presence. Every movement, every glance was calculated to unsettle and intrigue. Keisha felt a knot tighten in her stomach as she realized that Tasha wasn't merely a random intruder, she was a key piece in a puzzle that Keisha hadn't even known existed. As the seconds stretched into minutes, the room became a stage for a silent confrontation, a prelude to secrets and betrayals that were about to unfold. In that charged moment, both women sensed that this encounter would change everything. Tasha's sudden appearance wasn't just a twist in the tale, it was the beginning of a storm that would soon engulf all their lives in a web of deceit, manipulation, and unexpected alliances. In the days that followed Tasha's disruptive visit, Keisha found herself haunted by mixed emotions that churned like a restless sea. Every time she looked into the mirror, she saw not just her own reflection but a storm of confusion, admiration, and fear. The image of Tasha, with her unapologetic swagger and intense eyes, became an uninvited guest in Keisha's thoughts. "What am I feeling?" she'd ask herself in the quiet hours of the morning, feeling torn between resentment and a strange curiosity. On one hand, Keisha was furious. How dare someone intrude on her life with such brazen confidence? On the other, there was a part of her that couldn't help but admire Tasha's boldness and the way she seemed to own every space she entered. The internal battle was as visible as the lines on her face, a silent war waged between self-doubt and a fierce desire to reclaim her power. Sometimes when she was alone, Keisha would catch herself mimicking Tasha's cool demeanor, practicing a tone of voice that was both assertive and nonchalant. "I don't need anyone to tell me who I am," she'd say, though deep down the words felt like a fragile armor against the pain of betrayal. Late at night, while curled up in bed with her thoughts, Keisha replayed the confrontation in her mind, trying to piece together the fragments of her emotions. There was a part of her that wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, while another part simmered with anger. Her reflection became a mirror to her soul, a place where every doubt and every spark of courage was laid bare. In these moments, she realized that the intrusion of Tasha wasn't just an unwelcome break in her routine, it was a catalyst that forced her to confront the complexity of her own feelings. It was as if Tasha's presence had shattered the illusion of a simple life and replaced it with a multifaceted reality where trust, betrayal, and even admiration coexisted in unexpected ways. And so each day, as Keisha faced the world with a renewed determination, her inner dialogue grew louder, urging her to explore these emotions rather than hide from them. With every glance in the mirror, she began to see that strength wasn't about denying vulnerability, it was about embracing every facet of who she was, even if it meant acknowledging that sometimes the most unexpected reflections could lead to a path of rediscovery and growth. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface finally reached a boiling point one fateful afternoon when Tasha and Keisha locked eyes in an empty, echoing hallway. There was no mistaking the electricity in the air as Tasha approached, her steps measured and deliberate. "We need to clear the air, Keisha," Tasha said, her tone calm yet laced with an unmistakable edge. Keisha, still reeling from the shock of Marcus's abandonment and Tasha's sudden intrusion, took a steadying breath and met her gaze head-on. "I want to know why you're here," she replied, her voice soft but firm, the hint of vulnerability carefully masked by determination. The two women stood face to face, the silence between them charged with unspoken truths and past grievances. Tasha continued, "I'm here to show you that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Marcus, you, me, we're all caught in a web of secrets that go deeper than you'd ever imagine." Keisha's mind raced, struggling to untangle the layered meanings behind Tasha's words. It wasn't just about Marcus's betrayal anymore, it was about a series of choices and hidden agendas that had led them all to this tangled moment. The conversation soon veered into dangerous territory as Tasha hinted at confidential details that neither Keisha nor Marcus had been aware of. "You thought your life was just about high-end lingerie and glamorous parties," Tasha said, a slight sneer playing at the corner of her lips, "but there's a lot more behind the scenes." Their dialogue, raw and unfiltered, felt like a mirror reflecting the harsh realities of ambition, manipulation, and the shadows of past decisions. Keisha's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to hold onto her composure. "So, what's your game?" she asked, her tone equal parts defiant and curious. "My game?" Tasha echoed with a wry smile. "It's not a game, it's life. And sometimes you have to break a few promises to reveal the truth." In that moment, every word exchanged carried the weight of shattered illusions and the promise of a coming storm. Their confrontation wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was the prelude to a larger plan that involved betrayal, hidden contracts, and a truth that would change everything. Each word, every pause, echoed in the hallway like a countdown to an explosion that both women sensed was inevitable. As the conversation drew to a close, Keisha felt a mix of anger and reluctant understanding. The woman standing before her was both an enemy and, in a strange way, a catalyst for the changes that were about to upend her carefully constructed life. Just when Keisha thought the situation couldn't get any more complicated, Marcus stepped into the fray, his presence adding a whole new layer of tension. He had been keeping his distance since his shocking announcement, but now, drawn by the rising storm of confrontation, he found himself in the middle of it all. Marcus entered the room quietly at first, his eyes widening as he took in the charged atmosphere between Keisha and Tasha. The air grew even thicker with unspoken words and long-hidden resentments. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Keisha demanded, her voice trembling with both anger and hurt as she faced the man who'd shattered her heart. Marcus's gaze shifted nervously between the two women. I didn't mean to get caught up in this," he stammered, his voice betraying the remorse that had been simmering inside him since their breakup. Tasha stepped forward, her tone cool and measured. "It seems you're part of this mess too, Marcus. You can't hide anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication and regret. Marcus's face contorted with a mix of shock and sorrow as he realized that his role in their tangled lives was more significant than he'd admitted even to himself. "I thought I was just leaving," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. But now, standing amid the fallout, it was clear that his departure had been anything but simple. Keisha's eyes filled with tears, not just from the betrayal but from the realization that the man she once loved was now ensnared in a web of secrets and lies. The room was filled with charged silence as the three of them grappled with their new reality. Each second felt like an eternity as Marcus struggled to find the words to explain his involvement, to justify the actions that had led him to this moment of utter vulnerability. "I never wanted to hurt you," he finally said, his voice cracking with emotion. But the damage was already done. In that painful exchange, the boundaries between right and wrong blurred, leaving behind only the raw, unfiltered truth of their broken lives. The confrontation had escalated beyond what any of them could have imagined, and now, with Marcus caught in the crossfire, it was impossible to tell where one story ended and another began. As the silence settled once more, each of them felt the heavy burden of choices made and promises broken, knowing that this was only the beginning of an unraveling that would soon consume them all. In the wake of the explosive confrontation, Keisha was determined to uncover the truth behind the tangled web that now defined her life. She couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's cold farewell and Tasha's enigmatic hints were just the surface of a much deeper scheme. Over the following days, Keisha began digging into every detail of her past with Marcus, retracing their steps and questioning every promise that had once seemed so sincere. Every conversation she revisited, every moment of silence between them, now took on new meaning. "What was I really a part of?" she muttered to herself as she sat in the dim light of her living room, a notebook and pen in hand. Her heart was pounding, and each stroke of her pen was an attempt to piece together a puzzle that didn't quite fit. Marcus's aloof demeanor and Tasha's cryptic remarks gnawed at her thoughts like persistent echoes. In one particularly quiet evening, as rain drummed softly against her window, she recalled a conversation that had once seemed trivial, a comment Marcus had made about contracts and hidden agendas. Now, those words resonated with a painful clarity. Everything was planned, Keisha whispered, a chill running down her spine as she realized that her life had been manipulated like a well-orchestrated marketing campaign. The more she dug, the more she found hints of deception woven into the very fabric of her relationship with Marcus. It wasn't just about love or betrayal, it was about control, power, and the exploitation of trust. Her notebook filled with scribbles, each note a piece of a puzzle that was both frightening and undeniable. In a moment of raw determination, she decided that she wasn't going to be a pawn in someone else's game any longer. "I'm done being fooled," she declared softly, as if promising herself a future free from deceit. Her resolve hardened as she realized that the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way to reclaim her life. Marcus's regrets and Tasha's manipulative strategies were now clear signs of a larger, more calculated plan. With every new piece of evidence, the betrayal stung deeper, but so did her resolve. She was ready to confront the mastermind behind it all, even if it meant facing truths she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. And in that determination lay the first true glimmer of hope, a hope that she might someday rewrite her story on her own terms, with honesty and strength as her guiding stars. In a conversation that felt like it was straight out of a thriller, Tasha finally opened up about her real intentions. Sitting in a sparsely furnished room that echoed with the memories of past secrets, she looked straight into Keisha's eyes and said, "I'm not just here to stir trouble, I'm here to show you the bigger picture." Her voice was calm, almost conversational, yet every word carried the weight of a carefully planned strategy. Tasha explained that her actions weren't random acts of malice, they were part of a larger design to shake the foundations of the lives of those who had taken things for granted. "Marcus, you, and even me, we're all part of a system where truth is twisted and lies are dressed up as promises," she said, her tone almost gentle as she let the words sink in. Keisha listened, torn between disbelief and a reluctant understanding. The woman who had once been a stranger was now offering a glimpse into a world where emotions were manipulated and even trust was just another commodity to be traded. "I built my empire from the scraps of broken dreams and shattered promises," Tasha continued, a hint of pride mingling with regret in her eyes. She confessed that every move she had made was calculated, each decision a step in a grand plan designed to expose the hidden truths that Marcus had kept locked away. The revelation hit Keisha hard as it redefined everything she thought she knew about her life. Every whispered conversation, every late-night phone call now seemed like a piece of a complex puzzle orchestrated by someone who was more than just a rival. Tasha's words were simple and direct, cutting through the fog of confusion that had clouded Keisha's judgment for so long. "I never meant to hurt you, Keisha, but sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie," Tasha said softly, almost as if she was apologizing for the inevitable pain her honesty would cause. The raw vulnerability in her voice made it see. Wasn't just a cold calculation, it was a desperate attempt to free herself from the chains of a system that had always favored the cunning over the kind. In that moment, Keisha realized that the woman before her was a victim too, a victim of circumstances and ambition. The conversation ended with an unspoken understanding that everything they thought they knew was about to be questioned. And as Tasha left the room, her revelation left behind a trail of uncertainty, marking the beginning of a journey that would force both women to confront the true cost of their choices. Late one night, as the city slept under a veil of quiet desperation, Keisha discovered something that turned her world upside down, a contract she had unwittingly signed years ago. Hidden away in a dusty drawer, the document was a relic of a time when she trusted without question and believed in the promises of a man she once adored. The paper, yellowed with age and stained by time, detailed a model release that had granted someone else the right to control her image and, by extension, her life. As Keisha read through the legal jargon in a haze of disbelief, her mind reeled with the realization that every glamorous moment, every dazzling smile captured on camera, might have been part of a larger, more devious plan. "I never agreed to this," she whispered, her voice shaking with the shock of betrayal. The contract was more than just a piece of paper, it was a symbol of the betrayal that had been hidden in plain sight. Tasha's earlier hints about manipulation and hidden agendas now took on a darker, more personal tone. The realization that her own signature had allowed someone else to profit off her life was a gut punch that left her reeling. Every detail of the document was a reminder that she had been nothing more than a pawn in a game she hadn't known existed. Marcus's involvement in this shady business, once dismissed as mere infidelity, now loomed as part of a calculated betrayal that spanned years. In a mix of anger and sorrow, Keisha realized that her identity, her very essence, had been compromised long before the world learned of her glamorous facade. "This isn't just about love gone wrong," she muttered bitterly, "it's about control, and I'm tired of being controlled." Determined to reclaim her narrative, she resolved to expose the truth behind the unseen contract. The paper in her trembling hands was proof that nothing in her life was as it seemed. It was a calculated betrayal wrapped in legalese and hidden behind promises of fame and fortune. And with that realization, Keisha knew that her fight was just beginning, a fight for her dignity, her freedom, and the right to live her life on her own terms. Before Keisha had fully grasped the weight of the hidden contract, the unthinkable happened. A promo reel titled "Deception" by Tasha exploded onto the internet. In a matter of hours, the video had gone viral, its rapid spread fueled by scandal-hungry social media accounts and eager tabloid journalists. Every frame of the video exposed a piece of Keisha's life, painting her not as a glamorous icon but as a victim of manipulation and deceit. The video featured snippets of her most vulnerable moments, intercut with Tasha's cool, calculated commentary on every aspect of the plan. "This is the truth and nothing will ever be the same again," Tasha's voice echoed, a stark reminder of the betrayal that had been woven into every moment of Keisha's past. As the video racked up views and ignited heated debates online, Keisha watched in horror as her carefully constructed image crumbled before her eyes. The comments section overflowed with both sympathy and scorn, each message a stark reminder that the public was now a judge, jury, and executioner. In private moments, Keisha replayed the video over and over, each viewing a fresh wave of humiliation that mingled with her deep-seated anger. "I never thought it would come to this," she confessed to a close friend over the phone one evening, her voice breaking as she struggled to hold back tears. The promo reel wasn't just a betrayal, it was a public execution of her trust and her past. Every share and retweet was a nail in the coffin of her old identity, replacing it with a narrative she had never chosen. The media frenzy that followed was relentless. Talk shows, online debates, and heated discussions in every corner of the internet dissected every detail of her life. Marcus's involvement was questioned, Tasha's motives analyzed, and Keisha's heartbreak became a public spectacle. The scandal wasn't just about reputations, it was about control over a narrative that had once belonged solely to her. And as the world watched her unravel, Keisha realized that the viral exposé was not the end, but a catalyst for a much larger reckoning, one that would force every player in this twisted game to confront the cost of their actions. The fallout from the viral exposé hit Keisha like a tidal wave, and soon the glamorous illusion of her life began to shatter into a million painful fragments. Everywhere she turned, whispers and stares followed her, as if the entire world had turned its eyes on her personal tragedy. Her once pristine social media accounts were flooded with criticism, conspiracy theories, and even cruel jokes. What had once been a life of elegance and admiration was now tainted by public humiliation and shattered trust. Keisha felt as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff, peering into an abyss of regret and despair. How did everything go so wrong? She'd ask herself in quiet moments, the painful question echoing in her lonely apartment. Even the warm glow of her favorite lamp could not chase away the shadows of doubt that had crept into her mind. The exposé wasn't just a reminder of betrayal. It was a reminder of how little control she'd ever had over her own life. Each memory of luxurious nights, high-end fashion, and whispered promises now felt like a cruel joke. As days turned into sleepless nights, Keisha's internal struggle grew. She had to come to terms with the fact that her life had been manipulated from the very start. The dazzling image that the public once adored was now marred by the stain of deception and exploitation. In desperate attempts to reclaim her identity, Keisha sought solace in old journals and personal letters, trying to remember the person she once was before the lies took root. There were moments of anger when she wanted to lash out and moments of quiet introspection when she wondered if forgiveness was even possible. Amid all this turmoil, a single truth emerged: the life she'd known was built on illusions. And now, facing the harsh light of reality, she knew that it was up to her to rebuild, piece by broken piece, a version of herself that was real and untainted by the betrayal of others. In the echo of her despair, Keisha silently vowed that she wouldn't let the world's judgment define her. Instead, she would find the strength to rise again, even if it meant facing her darkest fears head-on. In the midst of the public chaos, Marcus found himself battling a tide of remorse that he could no longer ignore. The aftermath of his decisions weighed on him like an anchor, dragging him into an ocean of regret. Late at night, when the world had quieted down and the flashing cameras were replaced by the soft hum of streetlights, Marcus would sit alone in his study, haunted by the echoes of what he'd done. He remembered the moment when he had so casually ended his marriage with Keisha, as if it were a trivial inconvenience rather than the shattering of two intertwined lives. The regret gnawed at him relentlessly, each passing day a reminder that he'd not only betrayed the woman he once loved but had also played a significant part in the deception that now consumed their lives. "I never meant to hurt her," Marcus would mutter to himself, though he knew deep down that the damage was irreversible. His voice, filled with sorrow, often broke the silence of his lonely room. Marcus recalled the times when he had promised to protect Keisha's heart, only to trade the promise for a moment of selfish convenience. The viral expose had opened old wounds, and as he watched the public's harsh judgments rain down on him, he felt as if every tear that had ever fallen was now resurfacing. Every newspaper headline, every online rant about his betrayal was a sharp reminder of the pain he'd inflicted. Marcus's internal conflict wasn't just about guilt, it was about the realization that he had become a prisoner of his own mistakes. He began to see the intricate web of lies and half-truths that had led to this downfall, and with that understanding came a crushing sense of accountability. Late-night phone calls to old friends, filled with apologies and regretful confessions, became his solitary attempt to make amends. Yet, no matter how many times he tried to justify his actions, the truth was that Marcus had lost something far more valuable than his reputation. He had lost the trust and love of the one person who had truly mattered. And so, in the quiet despair of those solitary hours, Marcus resolved to change, even if it was too late to fix the past. He began to search for a way to redeem himself, to find a path that might lead to forgiveness, both from Keisha and from the person he'd once been. In that painful introspection, Marcus recognized that his journey to redemption was just beginning, and that every step forward would be a battle against the very demons he had helped create. As the scandal exploded into the public domain, the world seemed to converge on Keisha and Marcus's lives with relentless intensity. Social media platforms became battlegrounds for fierce debates where every comment and share amplified the chaos. News channels ran back-to-back stories dissecting every minute detail of their crumbling relationship, and tabloids splashed headlines that were as sensational as they were cruel. In the midst of this media frenzy, Keisha found herself caught in a storm of public opinion and harsh judgment. Every tweet, every news segment was like a drop of acid that slowly corroded the image she had once so carefully maintained. Is she really the victim, or is there more to this story? The public wondered as commentators played out scenarios that painted her as both a broken soul and a vengeful woman. Marcus's attempts at redemption were scrutinized and dismissed by many, leaving him to drown in a sea of regret and public scorn. The relentless coverage not only intensified the personal pain they both endured but also blurred the lines between their private lives and the public spectacle they had become. Amid all the chaos, private conversations emerged in hushed tones between friends and advisors who debated the true nature of betrayal and forgiveness. "Can people ever truly move past something this raw?" one friend asked, her voice filled with both sympathy and disbelief. In coffee shops and online forums, the narrative of their downfall was spun into a modern-day tragedy, one where the personal became political and the intimate became a public spectacle. The frenzy wasn't just about scandal, it was a societal reminder of how quickly a personal misfortune could be transformed into a headline for mass consumption. And yet, in the midst of the storm, there were glimmers of solidarity from unexpected quarters. Some online communities rallied behind Keisha, offering words of encouragement and promising that her strength would eventually shine through. But for every supportive comment, there were scores of harsh criticisms that cut deep. As the public's gaze intensified, Marcus and Keisha found themselves trapped in an endless cycle of judgment and regret. The public frenzy was a double-edged sword. It exposed hidden truths while also magnifying every flaw and misstep. And so, in the relentless glare of public opinion, both Keisha and Marcus began to question whether there was any escape from the shame that had become their constant companion. While chaos raged around Keisha and Marcus, Tasha was quietly orchestrating her own ascent to power. With the scandal now a hot topic across every media outlet, she saw an opportunity to build an empire from the fragments of shattered lives and public intrigue. Tasha moved with calculated precision, leveraging the media frenzy to position herself as the unfiltered truth-teller in a sea of lies. "People need someone to hold accountable," she'd say with a casual confidence that both infuriated and fascinated onlookers. In her sleek office, adorned with modern art and minimalist decor, Tasha strategized every move like a chess master. She held meetings with advisors, meticulously crafting press releases and interviews that emphasized her role as the mastermind behind the entire debacle. Her rise wasn't born out of a desire for fame alone, it was fueled by a deep-rooted ambition to control a narrative that had long been dominated by power and privilege. Tasha's backstory, filled with early struggles and personal setbacks, was slowly unveiled to the public, adding layers to her persona. The media painted her as a self-made woman who had clawed her way out of obscurity, using every setback as a stepping stone to success. In private conversations with influential figures, she shared her vision for a future where truth was valued above all else. "This is just the beginning," she'd tell them, her tone both soothing and determined. As her brand grew, so did the respect and fear she commanded in equal measure. Tasha wasn't just a bystander in the scandal, she was the architect, and now, with every headline and every viral post, she was emerging as the most powerful force in a game that had once been dominated by Marcus and Keisha. While they struggled to pick up the pieces of their broken lives, Tasha's empire expanded, fueled by the raw emotions and unresolved questions that the scandal had left in its wake. And as the public began to see her not just as a villain, but as a complex force of nature, Tasha's rise promised that the battle for truth and power was far from over. In the wake of the media storm, the personal fallout became painfully clear for everyone involved. Keisha's inner world was a tumult of despair and determination. She found herself reliving every moment of betrayal and humiliation with a painful clarity. Her once confident strides now faltered under the weight of public judgment and internal anguish. In quiet moments, she would stand by her window, gazing out at the city lights and wondering if she'd ever reclaim the spark that had defined her. The public ridicule was relentless, and yet, beneath it all, there was a resilient ember of hope. Marcus, too, was left grappling with the wreckage of his choices. His once unshakable pride was now riddled with remorse and regret, and he often found himself staring blankly at the mirror, haunted by the echoes of his past promises. His efforts to seek redemption felt clumsy and insufficient against the barrage of criticism and self-reproach that followed him everywhere. Meanwhile, Tasha stood at the epicenter of the chaos, a silent observer to the crumbling lives around her. While she reveled in her newfound power, there was an undercurrent of tension in her meticulously organized world. The fallout from the scandal was far more than just a public spectacle. It was a turning point that forced each of them to confront their deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Conversations among friends turned into intense debates about loyalty, truth, and the fine line between ambition and cruelty. "We're all paying a price," one close friend of Keisha confessed in a whispered phone call, the gravity of the situation evident in her tone. And as the days passed in a blur of media interviews and private reflections, it became painfully obvious that the lives of Keisha, Marcus, and Tasha were irreversibly changed. The aftermath of the scandal was a harsh reminder that no one was immune to the consequences of deceit. But even in the depths of despair, a spark of resilience began to kindle. It was as if the darkness itself was coaxing them to find their true selves amidst the ruins. And though the road ahead was uncertain and littered with the remnants of broken promises, each of them knew that this painful chapter was only the beginning of a journey towards personal transformation and eventual redemption. As the dust of the scandal slowly settled, Tasha's past began to unravel like a tightly wound spool of secrets. In quiet moments away from the glare of the public eye, she sat in a modest cafe, sipping black coffee while reflecting on the choices that had brought her to this point. Her early days were marked by struggle and ambition, a time when every setback felt like a personal failure and every victory was hard-earned. Tasha had grown up in a world where the odds were always stacked against her, and she learned early on that survival required cunning and determination. "I had to fight for every scrap of respect," she'd later confessed to a trusted confidant in a hushed, reflective tone. Those formative experiences forged in her a relentless drive to succeed no matter the cost. Now, as she watched the scandal unfold in real time, Tasha recognized the irony that her personal hardships had prepared her for this moment. Each calculated move, every public statement, was a testament to the lessons learned from a lifetime of ambition. Yet, there was also a bitter irony in the fact that the very traits that had helped her rise were now under scrutiny. Critics argued that Tasha's ambition was laced with cruelty and manipulation, but those who truly knew her understood that it was born out of necessity rather than malice. Conversations with old friends and mentors, though few and far between, revealed a side of her that was vulnerable and sincere. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," she once said, her voice trembling with a mix of regret and resolve. But ambition had a way of twisting intentions into actions that could no longer be undone. As Tasha continued to build her empire, every decision she made was a delicate balance between ruthless business strategy and a desperate need for personal validation. In a series of late-night phone calls with her advisors, she laid out her vision for the future, a future where every betrayal would be repaid and every secret would be brought to light. And while the scandal had cast a long shadow over her life, it also illuminated the path she had chosen, a path marked by the intertwining of ambition and heartbreak, where every sacrifice was a stepping stone to the power she now wielded. The web of ambition that Tasha had spun was complex and unforgiving, and as she sat there in that small cafe, she realized that her past, present, and future were now inextricably linked by the choices she had made and the scars they had left behind. With every passing day, the media circus intensified, turning the unfolding scandal into a public trial where every conversation was dissected and every mistake was replayed endlessly. Keisha, Marcus, and Tasha found themselves thrust into a relentless spotlight, forced to defend their actions in interviews, heated panel discussions, and social media debates. The once private drama had become a full-blown spectacle, with journalists acting as both prosecutors and jury. Keisha's voice, which had once been confident and resolute, now wavered as she tried to navigate the questions that cut to the core of her pain and betrayal. "I never thought my life would become a circus," she confided in a rare, quiet moment, the words heavy with sorrow and disbelief. Marcus, too, found no refuge from the constant barrage of scrutiny. Every attempt at an apology was met with suspicion, and every word he uttered was analyzed for hidden meanings. In one particularly intense televis, he looked directly into the camera and admitted, "I'm deeply sorry for the hurt I've caused, but I'm also trying to understand where I went so wrong." The public trial wasn't limited to formal media appearances, it spilled over into everyday conversations, online forums, and even family gatherings. Strangers debated their roles as if they were legal experts, and every comment section became a forum for theories about love, betrayal, and redemption. Amid all the chaos, Tasha's role in the debacle was simultaneously celebrated and condemned. Her unapologetic candor and business acumen made her a polarizing figure, admired by some for her fearless ambition and reviled by others for her cold manipulation. In hushed conversations at trendy cafes and bustling street corners, people questioned the morality of a world where personal tragedies were dissected like legal cases. "Is this justice, or just another form of exploitation?" a young onlooker once remarked, voicing the sentiments of a generation weary of scandal. The trial wasn't just about assigning blame, it was a reflection of society's hunger for drama, truth, and accountability. As each day passed, the lines between victim and villain blurred, leaving everyone involved to grapple with the harsh reality that in the court of public opinion, there were no clear winners or losers. And so, as the cameras continued to roll and the debates raged on, the three figures at the center of this modern tragedy were forced to confront not only their own choices but also the collective desire for a narrative that justified every tear, every betrayal, and every shattered dream. In the quiet aftermath of the relentless media storm, Keisha decided it was time to face herself and the painful truths that had haunted her for so long. Alone in her modest apartment, away from the prying eyes of the public, she sat in front of a full-length mirror, determined to confront the person she had become. The reflection staring back at her was not just a glamorous woman who once exuded confidence and charm, it was a mosaic of scars, hopes, and unspoken grief. "I need to understand who I am now," Keisha murmured softly, her voice carrying the weight of both sorrow and resolve. In that intimate moment, she began a conversation with herself, one that was raw and unfiltered. Every wrinkle and every tear was a reminder of the love she had lost, the betrayals that had broken her spirit, and the strength that was slowly, painfully being rebuilt. As she recounted memories from her happier times, she also allowed herself to feel the sting of betrayal and regret. The conversation in that quiet room was both cathartic and daunting, a deep dive into her innermost thoughts and fears. "I can't let this define me," she whispered fiercely, promising herself that the pain would be transformed into the fuel for a new beginning. With each passing minute, the mirror no longer felt like a harsh critic, but rather a silent witness to her struggle and resilience. It was as if, by facing the reflection, Keisha was reclaiming the narrative of her own life, one that had been hijacked by deception and heartbreak. In that vulnerable solitude, she vowed to rediscover her true self, piece by broken piece, and to rebuild her identity on her own terms. The internal dialogue, laced with both gentle self-reassurance and stern determination, marked a turning point. Keisha realized that while the scars might never fade completely, they could serve as a testament to the battles she'd fought and won. And as she looked deep into her own eyes, she felt a spark, a flicker of the woman she was always meant to be, ready to shine again despite the darkness that had once threatened to engulf her. After months of isolation and soul-searching, Marcus began to recognize that his path to redemption wasn't just about quiet regrets. It was about taking responsibility and making tangible amends. He knew he had to confront the pain he'd inflicted, not just on Keisha but on himself as well. Marcus started reaching out to those he'd wronged, both publicly and privately, in an effort to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. In one heartfelt phone call to a mutual friend, he admitted, "I've been a coward for too long, and I need to make this right." His voice, choked with remorse, resonated with the raw honesty of a man who had finally seen the consequences of his actions. Marcus enrolled in counseling sessions and began volunteering at local community centers, hoping that acts of service might somehow mend the broken pieces of his life. Every step he took was a struggle, yet with each apology and every small gesture of kindness, he slowly reclaimed a part of his lost honor. Media interviews, though still a minefield of harsh criticism, became an opportunity for him to speak honestly about his mistakes and the lessons he'd learned. "I can't erase the past," he told a sympathetic reporter one afternoon, "but I can work to ensure that I never repeat the same errors." His journey wasn't without setbacks. There were days when guilt and self-loathing threatened to pull him under, but the determination to change became his anchor. Gradually, Marcus began to see that redemption was not about public forgiveness, but about transforming his inner self. Each day, as he looked in the mirror, he resolved to become a better man, one defined not by his missteps but by his efforts to learn from them. And as he continued on this arduous path, a quiet hope began to take root. Perhaps someday, he and Keisha could find a way to heal the wounds of the past together. In the end, Marcus's redemption arc was a testament to the power of accountability, perseverance, and the belief that even the deepest betrayals could pave the way for genuine transformation. Just as new forces began to stir in the wake of the scandal, unexpected alliances and rivalries emerged, reshaping the landscape of the personal and public dramas that had engulfed Keisha, Marcus, and Tasha. In the midst of the chaos, new characters entered the fray: old friends, trusted advisors, and even some unexpected adversaries, each adding fresh layers of complexity to the unfolding narrative. Keisha found solace in the company of a longtime friend who had always stood by her, offering a shoulder to cry on and a listening ear when the burden of betrayal felt unbearable. "We're in this together," her friend would say, and in those moments Keisha felt a glimmer of the strength she had long forgotten. Meanwhile, Marcus encountered both support and opposition from those who had known him in different chapters of his life. Some admired his sincere efforts to make amends, while others were quick to remind him of his past misdeeds. These conflicting voices spurred him on, challenging him to prove that his journey toward redemption was genuine. At the same time, Tasha's influence began to wane among her inner circle as whispers of dissent emerged. Former allies, disillusioned by her ruthless methods, started aligning with new, emerging voices who promised transparency and justice. In one particularly tense meeting, a trusted advisor confronted Tasha, stating, "Your empire is built on lies, and it's only a matter of time before the truth tears it apart." The room buzzed with tension as rival factions formed around the central figures of the scandal. The alliances were as unpredictable as the winds, and rivalries were fueled by ambition and old grudges. Yet, amidst the swirling chaos, there was a shared understanding that the stakes were higher than any one person's reputation. The battle lines were drawn not only in the public eye but also in the quiet, personal conversations that carried the weight of betrayal and hope. As the new network of alliances took shape, each character found themselves forced to re-examine who they could truly trust. In this fraught environment, every whispered conversation and every public statement carried immense power, hinting at a future where loyalties would be tested and long-held alliances might shatter only to be rebuilt in the fires of newfound truth. And so, as the players maneuvered for position in this intricate game of trust and betrayal, the stage was set for an even more dramatic twist, one where every bond would be challenged and every rivalry would ultimately redefine the narrative of their lives. As the scandal's echoes reverberated through every corner of society, the high cost of fame became painfully evident for both Keisha and Marcus. What was once a life filled with glamour and effortless style now bore the heavy burden of public exposure. Every headline, every social media post was a constant reminder of how quickly one could fall from grace. Keisha, who had once thrived in the adoration of fans and friends, now faced the reality that her private pain had become a spectacle for millions. "Fame isn't all glitz and glam, it's a double-edged sword," she confided to a sympathetic reporter during a rare, candid interview. The personal toll was immense. Late at night, when the noise of the world finally quieted down, the silence left her alone with the memories of betrayal and heartbreak. Even the simplest pleasures, once taken for granted, now carried a shadow of sorrow and regret. Marcus, on the other hand, struggled to balance his attempts at redemption with the unforgiving glare of the public eye. Every act of kindness, every step towards rebuilding his life, was scrutinized and dissected by a society hungry for scandal. "I feel like I'm constantly on trial," he admitted during a quiet moment of vulnerability, the words barely audible over the hum of a restless city. The price of fame was not just measured in lost privacy or shattered reputations, it was the erosion of the inner peace that had once defined them. Conversations on talk shows, online forums, and even whispered discussions among friends revealed a common sentiment: fame, with all its glittering promises, was a heavy burden to bear. And yet, in the midst of this overwhelming pressure, both Keisha and Marcus began to see that their struggles might serve as a catalyst for change. They started to realize that true strength wasn't measured by public adoration, but by the ability to stand tall in the face of adversity. In private gatherings and intimate interviews, they spoke candidly about the cost of their newfound notoriety, sharing lessons learned in the most painful of circumstances. Their voices, though scarred by experience, carried a message of resilience and hope. They urged others to look beyond the facade of fame and to remember that every human being is far more than the sum of their public persona. And as the world continued to watch their every move, both began to understand that the ultimate price of fame was not in the loss of privacy, but in the challenge of rediscovering one's true self amid the glare of 1,000 unyielding eyes. While Tasha's empire continued to expand, the cracks in her once impenetrable facade began to show. At first, they were subtle: a misstep in an interview here, a whispered doubt in a private conversation there, but soon, the evidence of internal conflict and mounting external pressures became undeniable. Tasha's sharp mind and relentless ambition had carried her this far, but the cost of her calculated moves was now becoming painfully apparent. Every decision, every cunning maneuver that had built her empire, now seemed to weigh on her like a double-edged sword. In a rare moment of solitude in her luxurious office, Tasha stared out of a tall window at the city below and wondered if the price of her success was beginning to overtake the rewards. "Sometimes, I feel like the very thing I built is turning against me," she confessed to a trusted aide during a hushed late-night conversation. The aide, who had once admired Tasha's fearless determination, now hesitated as he saw the vulnerability hidden beneath her confident exterior. "It's like you're fighting your own shadow," he remarked softly, the words hanging in the air like a solemn promise of impending change. Publicly, Tasha continued to exude power and control, but behind closed doors, the weight of her ambition was taking a toll. Employees whispered among themselves about the increasing tensions and the growing cracks in the company's structure. The pressures of maintaining her carefully constructed image were compounded by the constant barrage of public scrutiny and the very real threat of betrayal from within her own ranks. Each challenge became a reminder that the same ambition that had once propelled her forward was now a source of relentless stress. In conversations with business partners and during tense strategy meetings, Tasha's steely resolve was frequently tested by doubts that no one else could see. "I built this from nothing," she would say, her tone resolute, "and I won't let anything tear it down." Yet, even as she vowed to hold on to her empire, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty in her voice, a silent acknowledgement that every empire, no matter how grand, could be undone from within. And so, as Tasha navigated the treacherous waters of her expanding, yet increasingly fragile empire, she was forced to confront a harsh truth. Every power has its price, and sometimes, the very tools you use to conquer the world can be the ones that ultimately destroy you. Just when it seemed that Tasha's empire was invincible, fate intervened with a dramatic twist that shifted the balance of power. Rumors began swirling about a major scandal brewing within her own organization, a betrayal from someone she had once trusted implicitly. The whispers of discontent grew louder, and soon a rival faction emerged, united by their desire to expose the cracks in Tasha's carefully built facade. In a tense boardroom meeting that was anything but ordinary, a high-ranking employee, trembling yet resolute, confronted Tasha with evidence of financial mismanagement and unethical practices that had been swept under the rug for far too long. "We can't keep living in the shadows of deception," the employee declared, voice shaking with a mixture of fear and determination. The room fell silent, and for the first time, Tasha felt the icy grip of vulnerability. Outside, the media caught wind of the controversy, and what was once a celebration of her power quickly turned into a public relations nightmare. Social media buzzed with new headlines that painted Tasha not as a mastermind but as a crumbling figure in a collapsing empire. Meanwhile, Keisha and Marcus watched the unfolding drama with a mix of relief and uncertainty. Their own journeys of redemption suddenly intertwined with the downfall of the very woman who had once orchestrated their pain. "This could be our chance," Marcus whispered to Keisha during a quiet moment away from the prying cameras, hope glimmering in his eyes. As public sentiment began to shift, Tasha's staunchest allies distanced themselves and a surprising alliance formed among those who had long been oppressed by her ruthless rule. The reversal of fortunes was swift and unforgiving, a stark reminder that in a world fueled by ambition and betrayal, nothing was permanent. In that moment, the tides turned and the empire that had once seemed unassailable was rocked by the very forces it had once commanded. The dramatic twist not only signaled Tasha's impending downfall but also set the stage for a reckoning that would redefine the relationships and power dynamics among all the players involved. And as the world watched in breathless anticipation, it became clear that the battle for truth and justice was far from over. Amidst the chaos of shifting alliances and public scrutiny, Keisha and Marcus found themselves drawn together by a shared need to confront the deep-seated wounds of betrayal. In a quiet, dimly lit cafe away from the prying eyes of the media, the two sat across from each other, their faces etched with the pain of past transgressions. "I never imagined it would come to this," Keisha admitted softly, her voice trembling as she recalled the promises that had been broken and the trust that had been shattered. Marcus's eyes, filled with remorse, met hers as he replied, "I know I hurt you and I've been trying to find a way to make it right." "I'm sorry." Their conversation, raw and unguarded, unfolded like a slow, painful peeling away of layers built up over years of neglect and betrayal. Each word was a step toward understanding the complicated web of lies that had ensnared them both. In that intimate setting, every shared confession became a testament to the heavy price they had both paid for their choices. They talked about the times when their love had once seemed unbreakable and the moments that led to the unraveling of their bond. Emotions ran high as both admitted to their faults and vulnerabilities, realizing that their suffering was intertwined, a mutual experience of betrayal that had left deep scars on both their hearts. "Maybe we can't go back," Marcus murmured, "but we can learn from this and build something new, something honest." Keisha nodded, a glimmer of hope softening the pain in her eyes. The conversation wasn't just an exchange of apologies, it was a journey into the very heart of betrayal, where forgiveness and understanding began to take root amid the ruins of their past. In that quiet corner of the world, away from the relentless glare of public judgment, they discovered that true redemption might lie not in erasing the past, but in facing it together. Their heartfelt dialogue resonated with a raw authenticity that promised, despite everything, the possibility of healing, a chance to transform betrayal into the seeds of a new beginning. With the echoes of past betrayals still lingering, Keisha began to realize that the only way forward was to reclaim her own narrative. In a series of quiet, personal moments of reflection, she discovered that her greatest strength lay in turning her pain into power. "I'm not defined by what's happened," she'd say to herself, a soft determination threading through her every word. Slowly but surely, Keisha started to gather the broken pieces of her identity and piece them together into something new, something that was undeniably hers. In long walks along quiet city streets and contemplative afternoons spent in a sunlit park, she began writing her story, not as a tale of betrayal and humiliation, but as a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Each word she scribbled was a declaration of her strength, a testament to the fact that she was more than the sum of her past mistakes. Friends and confidants marveled at the change in her demeanor. The once overwhelmed woman now radiated a quiet resilience. "I'm done being a victim," she declared during an impromptu conversation with a close friend over coffee, her tone casual yet firm. Her new perspective wasn't born out of a sudden miracle. It was the gradual result of long nights spent wrestling with her inner demons and the slow dawning realization that she had the power to shape her own destiny. As she began sharing her journey on social media, her story resonated with countless others who saw themselves in her struggles and her triumphs. The online community responded with an outpouring of support, offering words of encouragement, advice, and solidarity. With each passing day, The seeds of empowerment that Keisha had planted began to blossom into a confident, unbreakable spirit. And as she stood on the threshold of a future that was finally beginning to look bright, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always have the strength to rise above them. Her journey wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving and turning every hurt into a stepping stone towards a life filled with hope and unyielding resilience. As the forces that had once propelled Tasha's empire began to falter, the cracks in her formidable facade grew wider by the day. Rumors of financial mismanagement and internal discord were no longer hushed whispers but roared like a tidal wave that threatened to drown everything she had built. Longtime employees, once fiercely loyal, now hesitated to stand by her side as dissent took root within the ranks. In heated meetings behind closed doors, voices of defiance emerged from corners that Tasha had once ruled with an iron fist. "We deserve better than this endless cycle of manipulation," one of her top advisors declared, the words echoing through the silent room with a weight that could not be ignored. Tasha, who had always maintained a cool, unflappable exterior, began to show signs of the strain. Her usual confident replies were replaced by curt, clipped responses as she tried to salvage the empire that was crumbling beneath her. The media, always hungry for scandal, seized on these fractures, and what was once seen as her relentless ambition was now portrayed as hubris and downfall. Public sentiment turned swiftly as the people who had once admired her started questioning her every move. And while Tasha fought to hold on to the remnants of her power, it became clear that the very empire she had so meticulously built was betraying her. In this turning point, the internal dissent that had simmered beneath the surface now bubbled over into full-blown rebellion. With every day that passed, it became increasingly obvious that the empire was no longer a monument to her success but a fragile construct teetering on the edge of collapse. The once powerful aura of Tasha was now shadowed by doubt and vulnerability, leaving her to face the harsh reality that every empire, no matter how grand, could crack under the pressure of its own ambitions. In a dramatic turn of events, the paths of Keisha and Marcus converged once more as they decided to join forces in a bid to bring accountability to Tasha's crumbling empire. United by the shared experience of betrayal and a common goal of seeking justice, the two embarked on a tentative alliance that was as much about personal redemption as it was about righting the wrongs that had marred their lives. "We can't let this go on any longer," Marcus declared during a private meeting with Keisha, his voice steady despite the turbulence of emotions that roiled beneath the surface. Together, they began to navigate the treacherous waters of public opinion, carefully planning every step in their quest to expose the corruption that had infiltrated every corner of Tasha's world. Their journey wasn't easy, old wounds had to be reopened, and painful truths were forced into the light. In one particularly charged conversation, Keisha looked Marcus in the eye and said, "I know we've both been hurt, but if we stand together, maybe we can finally find the closure we've been searching for." Their renewed collaboration was marked by long hours of strategy sessions, confidential meetings with insiders, and a slow but steady dismantling of the elaborate facade that Tasha had constructed. Every revelation brought with it a sense of catharsis as layers of deceit were peeled back to reveal the raw, unvarnished truth. And while the public watched with bated breath, Marcus and Keisha discovered that their alliance was not just a tactical maneuver, it was a journey of personal healing. An opportunity to rebuild trust and rediscover the parts of themselves that had been buried beneath betrayal. As they faced the consequences of their actions and navigated the relentless scrutiny of the media, the duo slowly transformed from victims into agents of change. In their shared struggle for redemption, they not only began to reclaim control over their own lives but also sent a powerful message to a world that had long reveled in their downfall, that even in the midst of betrayal, there was always a chance for reckoning and renewal. The day arrived when Keisha, Marcus, and even Tasha had to confront the relentless media machine head-on in a final public showdown that would redefine their lives. In a packed press conference held in a modest hall that buzzed with anticipation, the three figures stepped up to the podium ready to tell their own story without the filters of scandal-hungry tabloids. Keisha began, her voice steady yet laced with the echoes of past heartbreak. "I'm here today to reclaim my truth. No one else will tell my story for me." Marcus followed, adding his own words of apology and hope, and even Tasha, for the first time, allowed her guard to drop as she acknowledged the mistakes that had led her to this moment. Their combined narrative was one of transformation, a journey that had seen them fall from grace only to rise again with a new understanding of themselves. The audience, both in the room and watching online, was captivated by the raw honesty and vulnerability that permeated every word. In small, triggering conversations that broke out among attendees, whispers of support and shock mingled with discussions about the power of truth and the possibility of forgiveness. "This is the story of our lives," Marcus said softly, "a story that isn't about betrayal but about the courage to face it and move on." And as the press conference drew to a close, the three left the stage together, united by a new narrative, one where each of them was not defined by past mistakes but by the strength it took to change. Their final words echoed like a rallying cry that every downfall had the potential to lead to a brighter, more honest future. In that defining moment, the media's narrative was forever altered and the world was left with a story that wasn't just about scandal but about the resilience of the human spirit. 6 months later, the echoes of the scandal had finally started to fade into memory, replaced by a quiet, reflective calm. Keisha and Marcus, now transformed by their painful journey, had found a new sense of identity, a life built on resilience, accountability, and the hard-won lessons of their past. In a small, sunlit room filled with memories of both sorrow and triumph, Keisha sat by a window watching the world go by with a serene smile. Her once tumultuous life had settled into a gentle rhythm, each day a testament to the power of recovery and the beauty of new beginnings. Marcus, too, had learned to live with his mistakes, working tirelessly to rebuild the trust he had lost and to show that redemption was possible. Their paths, once marred by betrayal and public spectacle, now intertwined in subtle ways that spoke of growth and mutual understanding. Tasha's empire, meanwhile, had crumbled under the weight of its own ambition, leaving behind lessons about the cost of ruthless power. In quiet moments of introspection and in candid conversations shared with close friends, Keisha and Marcus would recall the bitter days of scandal with a sense of gratitude, grateful for the painful experiences that had taught them who they really were. And as they moved forward into a future filled with hope and genuine connection, they encouraged everyone to find strength in adversity and to never let the dark chapters define them. "Our scars are reminders of battles fought and lessons learned," Keisha would say, her voice warm and reassuring. In the end, their story wasn't just about betrayal and public humiliation, it was a saga of transformation, of the courage to face the storm and emerge stronger on the other side. And so, as you reach the end of this tale, please share your comments, perspectives, and lessons learned in the comments section below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and spread the word about this journey of redemption and hope. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to drop your comments, share your thoughts and lessons learned in the comments section below, like the video, and subscribe to the channel for more stories.